தமிழரின் பிம்பம் உங்கள் TVI.
Good afternoon, dear viewers. Welcome to CrossRoads on TVI. I'm your host, Parthi Khandaval. This week saw the start of school for many students and parents. The start of this new school year also brings into focus the approach to parenting many constantly think and negotiate over. At the heart of this debate is whether are we over or under parenting. Joining us in this discussion, we have Subhi Shahan, an interior designer and mother of a 5-year-old. Aristo Ariyaratnam, a mortgage agent and a father of a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and Ramesh Seludre, the production manager of the upcoming and much anticipated film, A Gun in a Ring. He's a father of a 7-year-old, a 4 and 2-year-old. As always, please call us at 416-623-8100 to ask your questions and to share your thoughts on parenting and any questions you may have on that. Welcome, Aristo, Subhi, and Ramesh. No problem. So what kickstarted this theme for today's show was a Facebook post by Subhi. It was a New York Times article entitled "Raising Successful Children," and it was I thought it was very similar to our community in that we have, traditionally Tamil parents both back home and here program their kids a lot. We constantly hear about our relatives and even maybe some of us who have children who are putting our kids into Mirandang class, tuition, swimming, karate, and what the mainstream calls overprogramming. And in the US, there was a book released that called it the Tiger Mom Syndrome or approach, where we program our kids. And so you had mentioned, maybe you feel a little guilty for not doing or bringing that approach. So what prompted you to make that comment?
I think it's more to do with with my line of work, the fact that I'm not too involved in in enrolling her in these extracurricular activities. But I find referring to that article, the author talks about how overparenting actually is not beneficial in the sense we're not teaching our kids to think for themselves. Just my approach of accidentally hands-off approach when it comes to these things. When it comes to her education, since I don't sit down with her and do her homework or enforce the rule of doing her math or anything, she actually takes initiative, and comes to me with books to read. To her, so just that approach actually, creates that initiative in her to do.
But you mentioned you felt a little guilty for not sending her to prayers. Where do you think that guilt comes from?
From not, enrolling her in.
I guess, do you see a value in that, or?
It's actually by accident. I would like to do all that. A lot of my friends are. More into the Tiger Mom approach, and I think a lot of us kind of enroll our kids because of that peer pressure. We want to do what our friends are doing for their kids. We want to have our kids grow up the same way. We don't want to deprive them of all those activities that we have to enroll them in.
And yeah, same kind of concept. You see it happen all the time. So now even I've jumped onto the boat of I got to get him into swimming and soccer and karate and things like that. But it's kind of hard to be flexible with my schedule, my wife's schedule.
But you see the value in rolling.
There is value in it. I don't know about the go because I don't know how much a kid that age can handle at a 4-year-old. But there is value in it. Putting them in different things, getting them used to different ideas and different social skills and things like that when they do these group activities. It's important, so I do see value in it.
And Ramesh? Which style do you come from?
The only thing that I kind of think back is like, why are we putting our kids into X number of programs on a week basis? And is it coming down to peer pressure? You look at your friends and their kids is going to so-and-so class, and are we supposed to feel guilty for not sending our kids to this same number of class. So my approach is to find the right balance.
Okay.
Right? Because each household is different. And, each household functions differently.
So you speak about a balance. So what's the value to you for sending your children to these classes?
Well, in terms of, if I send my older daughter, she goes to Bharatanatyam. So we see that as a route to our culture. Okay. Because we came here when we were young, and we didn't really grow up in Sri Lanka a lot. So the culture to us is what's been, what we found from here.
Right.
So we say, okay, these are the kind of things that should be our culture. So we put our kids to, so-and-so programs. But yeah, that's the way I see it.
Okay. So, like all of you mentioned, a lot of your peers and our peers bring that approach, that style, enrolling the kids in a lot of programs, having a disciplined, structured program. Mondays this, Tuesdays this, Wednesdays that, and so on. Right. So there's a certain value in it, right? And it comes from that book called, The Battle Hymn of a Tiger Mom. And it's written by a Chinese American mother, and her belief in that approach is in her opinion the best approach. And we'll watch a clip of her speaking about that. Clip 1.
I am a proud, strict mom. I guess I do think that Western parenting today has become too permissive and too indulgent. I think that we in America can ask just a little bit more of our children, and they will not only rise to the challenge but thrive. So Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother is actually not a parenting guide or an education guide. It's just supposed to be a funny memoir. I was raised myself by super strict Chinese immigrant parents. And if I told you, some of the ways that I was raised, I think a lot of people would say, oh my God, she must have been miserable. We had to get straight A's, we had to come straight from school and drill math and Chinese and piano and no boyfriends. But amazingly, my 3 younger sisters and I actually had a really happy childhood. There are these cultural differences. It's hard to understand if you're coming from outside the family, but we had so much fun. There was a lot of love. And in retrospect, I would say that my parents being so tough on me, even though I had a lot of complaints when I was growing up, I would say now, looking back, that their having had such high expectations for me is the greatest gift that anyone has ever given me. Which is why I tried to raise my own 2 daughters, Sophia and Lulu, the same way that my strict Chinese immigrant parents raised me.
Okay, so in that clip, Amy Chu talks about that it was only when she became an adult she realized the value of her parents' strict upbringing. So what are your thoughts on perhaps that is the better route, or a long-term solution approach?
I would tend to disagree with that. I was brought up with fear being instilled in me. I think I was more obedient because of that fear that my dad instilled. So I don't think that's a healthy approach to raising your kids. It creates a sort of lack of self-esteem, lack of self-confidence. So I don't really totally agree with how they brought us up, and because we have that to compare to, I think we can just choose the pros and cons of how they raised us and apply it to our own kids. And parenting is a learning thing as well. We weren't given a book or anything to read, and it's we learn from them, and they teach us how to raise this. And back then there was lack of communication too between our parents and ourselves.
Ramesh, what are your thoughts?
Exactly. So just like how we are pondering how we're going to raise our kids, you have to think our parents at their time had probably thought the same thing, and they were trying what's the best, and they did what they thought was the best thing to do, right? Given whatever information that they had at that time.
But presumably they, like our parents' generation, they raised us very similar to their parents. Right. And then that generation was very similar. I think our generation, because of the cultural context, were different. So if they based it on their parents and they thought, okay, that's the way you do it, and so on, why should we differ?
Because times have changed.
Okay.
the world around us, where we are right now, we have to sort of adapt, and we have to get our kids to adapt to how society works in the northern, like in the Western, world. And prime example is my wife and me. She's Sikh. She was raised in Canada, and I was born in Sri Lanka. And, migrated here and there, and I finally ended up here when I was 12. She comes from a family that's like Tiger Mom. Her mom stood by her. She did piano, swimming, this, that, everything else. And she's a prime example of what the article that you just put up was, that if you put them in all these things and you force them into it, they'll be very successful. So she's very book oriented. She's probably going to kill me after this, but she's very book oriented, very successful, MBA, all this stuff, high profile jobs. But she's not the most social person. Right? So me, on the other hand, my parents, because I was in and around, I was sort of going through transition. There was a point where I came and said, I'm going to do it my way. My parents sort of backed up because I was sort of defiant. Everybody can relate. And I did my own thing. In hindsight, at the age of 34, now I'm thinking, oh, maybe I should have done that. Where would I be? Now I'm going to go back to learning how to play the piano. I never got that opportunity, but I'm going to go.
I think I can connect with that. I took 4 years of Indian flute, and in grade 8, when my guru moved, I was so happy. But now I regret it because I think it's a valuable skill. So I think there's a lot of truth in that, like sometimes forcing strict discipline, whether it's an instrument or whatever, that the kids will only realize, like the author Amy Chu said, that we'll get a benefit of later down in our lives. So on that topic of our own, we look and modify our own parenting techniques. Where else do you guys get your parenting strategies and techniques from?
I would say my wife is actually an elementary school teacher. So, and from just interact with other kids and other parents, right? Obviously her colleagues, her friends, and magazines that she subscribes, right? It kind of gives you guides to. It's not the the book of how to raise the parents, but it can give you direct you to a certain path that that will certainly help you out. That's
but do you feel there's I'm assuming the two of you find strategies in magazines and books?
I think parenting is almost like experiment too, right? So you know what you got from when you were growing up. You know what the world says to do. You know what TV says to do. And then you read a couple of articles and you see examples of how parents are doing it. So you try to take the best of everything. But it's an experiment at the end of the day, right? You're not going to be that perfect parent as you want to be. You might say something wrong and you might do something wrong, but it's you learn and sort of adapt with your own child and what his habits or what he likes, and you build from that. That's more how we're doing it.
Right. I think that's the key thing. As a parents, we are still learning to be parents. We are not the not everyone is the expert parent.
And
but do you feel there's an overload of information, whether it's articles like the New York Times or magazines,
it's
books?
whether you read it or not, right?
Yeah, and everybody has their own perspective on everything, right? You might think this is orange, and I might say it's purple. We've debated all day. Like me and my wife even debate about what are we doing. We read this article before the show, and she was like, "Oh, I would never do that." I'm like, "Why not?" And so we were fighting about it. So it's even us, we have kids, and we're fighting about how to raise them. Still there's things that she said she would do, and I said, "No, they should do it this way."
And just adding to that, it's actually healthy to have one parent approach parenthood in one way and the other. If one is strict, the other should be more lenient, just so that the child has hope that he has somebody to confide in.
Some will say that you're sending mixed messages to the child. That if one parent is a certain style and the other parent's another style.
That's true, because if you start, in my opinion, if you start doing that, then the kids tend to be smart and they tend to pick up on it, right? And now they know for which parent to go to for something that the other parent wouldn't say okay to, right? So,
but that's the thing. You shouldn't actually do that in front of the kid. Like you shouldn't oppose the approach that the other parent is taking. You can probably have a discussion out of your side of the kid, just among yourselves, and kind of arrive at a similar approach together.
And kids are smart. They'll feel it out. They'll know when to, I'll go to my 4-year-old tries it. And I told my wife, whatever he comes and tells you, just say whatever your daddy said, because there's no debating about it. Especially, we can debate afterwards, but in front of them, we have to be united. If not, things will go, they'll use that against us.
Have any of you gone to parenting workshops or seminars to teach parenting?
No.
We've all experienced it. Like, you know, at our age, we had the parenting, you know,
Yeah.
workshop from our parents, and now we're giving it. So
Well, some people say that parenting is an art, it's a craft, and there's certain, I wouldn't say rules, but there's certain guidelines that need to be followed, and it's something that, like a school, like a class, you learn in a collaborative atmosphere. Do you think there's value in parenting workshops, seminars?
definitely, there's always something you can pick up that you didn't know, right? At
Okay.
anything. Even talking to somebody, you pick up something. So those class shops are probably really good. Never been to one, but you know.
Ultimately, I guess it's your choice to apply whatever you learn or not,
Yeah.
right?
And there's no like a set time to learn. You can learn all your life. You know.
So let me pose this question. What does it mean to be a second generation Tamil Canadian parent? What does that mean to you?
To me, that means I'll try our best to bring our kids as Tamil culture as possible.
Okay.
But at the same time, we have to look at the reality that, you know, they belong to a Western society. So we find the right, like I said before, is we try to find the right balance, right?
But specifically, what is that balance then? Like, I mean, it's a very common response. You know, we have to balance whether it's our identity, whether you're a teenager or a parent. You're gonna get a balance. But what does that mean? Like, which parts do you reject, and which parts do you accept?
Well, I went to elementary school here. I started my life in grade 7. So I know going to the school system here, you know, say skating, swimming, these are some fundamental things you're expected to know when you work in the grade 9. So because of that, I'll make sure my kids have the proper foundation for skating and swimming classes. That's a must in our household. And then anything else we have, you know, on maybe one extra class for be Tamil class or religious class, Hindu class, or Bharatanatyam. Right. So that's the balance that works in our household, right?
All right. It's time for a break, but when we get back, we'll continue this discussion on culture, language, and religion as second generation parents. Dear viewers, we'll be back in a short moment. Welcome back, dear viewers. I'm your host, Parthik Handaval on CrossRoads on TVI. Today's show, we're looking at parenting with Aristo, Subi, and Ramesh. And just before the break, we're discussing the topic of passing certain values to our, you know, what would be the third generation. We discussed about language and the importance of culture and religion. How do you find that as a challenge or as a responsibility to your children?
Well, in my household, it's a challenge because my dad's Catholic, my mom's Hindu. So I was brought up with both. I went to church and the temple. My mom went to both, my dad went to both. We didn't have a choice, you know, we just did it. It was just easier. Now with mixed culture in my own house, which my wife's Sikh, so we go to Gurudwara and we go to church. You know, and once in a and the temple, once in a while my mom has functions or you know, if there's an event. So it's a challenge as it is. We don't know what's going to happen, but we had an agreement they're both going to be Catholic. So that was an agreement we already made before even kids came out. So that's how it's going to work. She's agreed to it. But obviously they'll get exposed to everything because I think that's important because you don't want kids only in one religion but not know what's going on, and then, you know, I mean, they're going to be ignorant about the other people's religion and cultures. So I want them to be into everything, right? But their primary religion would be.
I grew up where my dad, you know, started off being religious and you know, sort of enforcing us to pray every day. And then suddenly he did become atheist. and then we stopped going to temples. You know, so the majority of my life, the religious aspect was kind of lacking, and I think that's sort of what I'm unconsciously or subconsciously passing it on to my daughter. And my husband is not as religious as well, so you know, it is a challenge. I would like her to know about our religion, and for the time being, we do leave it up to.
And with language?
With language, it's a sad case. Yeah, we discussed, me and my husband, that we would, you know, talk to her in Tamil. But somewhere along the way, after she started school, we reverted to, you know, English, and that's what's going on now. We're lucky if she knows a few words in Tamil. But we are looking into sending her to Tamil classes, and you know, but it is a challenge when it comes to that.
And remember?
Right. Yeah. Going back to the religion itself. See, here we live in the Western society. And at school and at workplace, we're exposed to Christmas, Easter, and all the Christian festivals. And us, as being practicing Hindus, it's very tough for us to distinguish the differences for young kids. Like, okay, we could put up a Christmas tree, right? And participate in the gift exchange, or, you know, go Easter egg hunting. But are we really? Do you really want our kids to grow up thinking
that's the normal?
But that's the problem, right? When non-Catholics or Christians start doing that, the kids think this is Christianity, and that's the problem. I see that a lot, and I'm like, what are you doing? They're really hardcore religious, you know, go to Hindu temples, but then they got a Christmas tree up, they're giving gifts and this and that. I'm like, but what are you teaching your kid? Like, it's just gift time?
You know, some people say, like, many strong communities here are strong because they practice their faith in a very strong manner. So does our generation realize the importance of passing, whether it's Christianity or Hinduism?
Well, we're confusing our own kids, kind of thing, right?
Exactly.
But is that a challenge you're finding with
it
your
is
children?
very challenging, because
and
the kids know more about the Christianity religion in terms of the
so
festival.
what are your efforts to promote Hinduism?
They ask us, what is the Hindu festival, right? So we could say Puttanuvula, the Tamil New Year, and there isn't too many. Unfortunately, there isn't too many. Yeah,
because they only know. Okay, how come that day's not off?
But what about in terms of the philosophy and, like, the gods, goddesses? Like, do you make an effort?
We have kids' religious books that we are very keen on educating our kids on that. So she is pretty good. My older one is pretty good at her concept of Hindu religion, and so we do often go to temples and do practice Hinduism. But at the same time, now we are starting to inform her that, okay, we are going to put up a Christmas tree. Like you said, we do put up a Christmas tree, but it's just for the fun of it, right? We put candies out, you know, for Halloween, and, you know, get the kids dressed up. But we do all that, but at the same time, we try to inform the kids, okay, it is not our Hindu religious thing to do, but we are still going ahead and doing with it, right?
And
you can't.
I guess what you're referring to is balance, right?
Yeah, but when a 4-year-old asks you to, you know, go trick or treating, you can't tell a 4-year-old, no, you can't go, right? It's not real religion. You can't do that to a kid.
I know, like you're saying, you can't. But then, if you look at the Muslim religion, which is the strong, you know, they're the fastest growing religion in the world right now. They don't do any of this. Do you know what I mean? They don't. They don't even
that's
dare
a very
do
good
it.
point.
So how can you say? So you're sort of saying giving into society and the way to do things and put your kid this way, but there's cultures who are getting much better than us. We're losing our culture as Tamils, as Sri Lankans. I notice it. I see it. You know what I mean? Even me, like, I used to be able to even write. Now I can't write anymore. I can speak, but it's like I was saying. You know, a white American can understand, or a Canadian can understand what I'm saying in Tamil because I'm throwing some of the English words in there.
So Arista making a good point. Are we, by celebrating other cultures, other religions, are we losing our own?
Definitely.
Yeah.
So then, is there value in celebrating other things, whether it's Halloween or Christmas?
There isn't a long-term value.
But
just for the kids' temporary satisfaction, we are, you know, bending our rules.
Yeah, which is unfortunate. I have to disagree, because, like, why would, like, if I was like I don't know, there's Hindu things, and I know the Hindu culture, and I know the tradition, but there's not going to be a celebration in my house for Hindu culture. I mean, not culture, Hindu religion days, because they're not going to understand it, and I can't explain it. I'm not going to live it. So by just having, you know, Diwali or something like that, they're not like, what are you doing? You know, the kids are going to get confused in the process. So I try to keep it the way it is. You know, if it's Catholic things, they'll know about it. If it's Easter, they'll know about it. Right? The Hindu ones, they're not going to know about it. If I'm at an event or something, they'll come with me, but they're not going to know what it is. You know, it's just an event they're getting into. Same with the Sikh stuff, right?
So do you celebrate non-Hindu?
We do.
Okay.
We do. I think it's also important to kind of instill other cultures and other events into our lives, because they are exposed to other kids, and you do want them to understand what Christmas is about. And even though Hinduism, you are part Hindu, and your kids do interact with your your grandparents, let's say. So you do want them to understand. You can't exclude that part.
No, it's not excluding, but in my house we're Catholic, so we're going to have Catholic functions more, and we're not going to, I don't have a Hindu god. Like, I think I have a Ganesh somewhere. You know what I mean? Mom gave it to me as when we moved into the house. But he knows what it is. He knows it's a Hindu god, but he knows we're Catholic. At the age of 4, he'll know I'm Catholic. He might not know the detail, but he knows there's a Jesus and a God, and he thinks when someone dies, they go up to God. That's it.
But in your case, you might have a slight advantage, right? Because you're practicing Catholic.
Yeah.
And so when our kids are practicing Hindus, go to school, and they're making Christmas cards and Easter bunnies, and they come home with that exposure.
Yeah, it's a hard battle. Don't get me wrong. It's a very hard battle.
Exactly. So if it's a hard battle, so I think what Aristo is suggesting is that when your children come home from school and they ask these questions, you have to take the time, the hard work to explain to them the difference. So are you worried that by celebrating or recognizing other religions, you might compromise your own child's religion?
I'm worried, but at the same time, I'm cautious. I'm practicing with a caution, in a sense, right? Yes, we will go ahead and do this, but at the same time, she's learning the fundamentals of Hinduism. So therefore, when she comes up and when she grows up, hopefully she can distinguish, even though she's been putting up a Christmas tree and celebrating Christmas for the last 10 years, whatnot. That she grows up to know her own identity in religion.
Yeah, the other part is, Catholicism is commercialized. Do you know what I mean?
Most religions, as most
religions.
Moving to an interesting topic, it's the topic of freedom with our kids, and most of your kids, all your kids are very young, but at one point they'll be older, and the question of freedom will come up. How will you and your partner tackle that issue? Like, I guess compared to how our parents presumably had strict parents and freedom was limited when we were teenagers, right? How would you approach that, Ramesh?
Well, I don't think we could exactly use the same techniques that how we were brought up.
Exactly.
Because times have changed, laws have changed, right? We can't physically, punish a kid. So you have to adapt to that changing environment, right? My 4-year-old and my 7-year-old, they get into a fight. We try to put them, separate them, give them time out. On a worst case scenario, we'll put them in the garage and open the door, right? But in terms of freedom, I'm saying that what I'll probably be doing is a little more flexible, right? But at the same time, make them understand the strict rules of the house in a sense.
I think it's also important to open that, the line of communication between myself and my daughter, so that she can approach me with whatever issues we have to deal with. So just having that open communication that we lacked when we were raised, that might help. She won't rebel, or if we're able to.
But would you say you will be more of a best friend to her than a parent?
More so, just for that communication part. I don't want to be excluded in any of the things that she's doing. So this makes it easier for her to approach me.
What's the disadvantage of that, of being a best friend?
Well, in my opinion, there's going to be obviously pros and cons to that.
The cons?
Let's say for pros, you have an open line of communication. Any kind of issues, they come back to you. So it will help. At the same time, you lose the when you have to be a strict parent, then you can all of a sudden put a strict parent face and handle the situation, right? So that's what I think.
Marissa, your approach to your thoughts on freedom?
Well, thing is, because I'm a little bit different than these two guys. Mine was a little bit. My parents are away. I was here by myself. I sort of had a little bit more freedom.
Okay.
That's probably why the reasons I didn't do piano and swimming and things like that. But my freedom, gave me the ability to become who I am.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? That's you know what I mean? Like my street smarts and things like that. It's because of my freedom. I did kind of things. I learned. I made mistakes, definitely, lots of them. But I learned from that. So that was the freedom. But the unfortunate part is, I don't have a great relationship with my parents, in a sense where we don't sit down and talk. Like the Sri Lankan father, comes home, works, goes to sleep. Eats and goes to sleep or goes out. There's no communication. And I envy that. My wife's side, they have after every event or in the mornings, they sit down, they eat breakfast together, and they sit in the coffee and they talk, openly. Like, I'm like, holy shit, this is amazing. You know what I mean? Like, so I like that. So I would like to instill them. I would like, hey, how did your day go? What did you do? You know what I mean? But it's not going to be. I'm not going to be best friends with them. My son tells me now when he gets mad at me, I'm not your friend. I said, I'm not your friend. I'm your dad.
Okay, so this idea of giving freedom, right? Some will argue that it's because of excessive affection. It's because we're smothering. Not smothering, but we're loving them too much. We're giving them out of our affection or love for them. We're giving them freedom. We think we're giving them a gift, but is that actually something bad?
Yeah. We're nurturing them too much. They'll never in the real world. It'll never be like that.
Because you see this coming up in our a lot of people will comment now. When you look at Tamil kids growing up now, some will argue they have too much freedom. Their parents are buying them everything they want, giving them the ability to go outside and socialize more. And is that coming out of a good intentions, no doubt? But is there negative effects to that?
Yeah, hard work isn't valued by these kids anymore.
Yeah.
Parents are working 2-3 jobs. That's why they're not able to do it. But the kids aren't valuing it. To them, it's like, oh, I got money, I have a car, I have a nice house, and they're they're not understanding all the hard work that's happening behind it to have it. So I think if the parents are more involved in instead of buying that nice BMW for their kids, then the kids will be have better understanding and what's real in the world.
So you think that's something that's happening in our community now, that parents have become too lax, too soft?
Well, in a sense, yes, but then they are doing again what they think is the right thing to do.
Yeah, no doubt. But is it right? Is it objectively right?
That certainly time will tell when the kids grow up, right?
But we could even see it now, right? Like you can't see a certain time. It's already happening now.
True.
Do you know what I mean? The kids are already like. Our name gets in the community, maybe because that's how news works. When our kids do something bad, Tamil teen does this. Right. Tamil community. It's not even Sri Lankan anymore. It's Tamil teen. Right. And they're doing things. They're bored. There's no foundation. There's no rules to keep them in a certain way. They do whatever they want, whenever they want, because parents aren't around to help. Because they're working so hard because they think that's good.
That's what
they want to have the best house for their kids, have university education, but these guys won't even go to university.
But is it coming out of a lack of time? Like, Arista mentioned, there's a lot of parents working 2-3 jobs combined. Is that disadvantaged in our community?
I certainly think it plays a huge role in how the kids' upbringing is. Like in our household, we said that every dinner meal we'll have together, no matter what things we have to do. We'll always have, because that's the only meal like in today's world, right? She goes to work, I go to work, kids go to daycare, school, and we come back and we only have one meal. So we need to make sure that we are all together on the table and openly communicate, right? Discuss things. So I think that's a very key thing to do for the kids to.
That sets good foundation.
So what are your thoughts on this? You mentioned earlier you're very easygoing in a way with your daughter. Do you fear later on that might be a problem?
I do. I honestly do. She, but I am happy the fact that I'm not there. She's still, that initiation is there. Like she hasn't lost. It's not to stay. She's not a brat child. She's not deprived of anything. They're still they're her grandparents. They're there at home to teach her whatever I'm not there to. There's my husband who comes. From work, and he has that time too. So there's still like support system for her, but I do regret not being there personally to kind of see to these things.
Okay, it's time for a short break. Dear viewers, please join us after the short break, and again, please do call us at 416-623-8100 if you have any questions or comments about parenting. Thank you. Welcome back, dear viewers. On our show today, we're discussing parenting with three young parents, Aristo, Subi, and Ramesh. Before the break, we're discussing the idea of freedom. And connected to that is the idea of, I think, our generation, because generally we have 2-3 kids max, compared to our parents' generation, which generally came from families of 5 to 10 kids. And, obviously, as a result of having 5 to 10 kids, parents have less time to focus with each individual child. Now, with our families with 2 to 3 kids on average, we have more time naturally. And one phenomenon that's come out is that we spend too much time, and part of spending too much time with our kids, we praise them a lot for little things that they do. What are your thoughts on it? Is that important to build self-esteem, to build confidence?
I think so. I think praising them encourages them to keep doing, what we're praising them to do. So children definitely need that from us. They look to us, to tell them what's right, what are the good things they're doing. So I think it is important. I know the article that you were referring to earlier, it did mention that praising them, we're putting too much pressure on them, where if you tell them that you're really smart, that we're titling them in the sense that they're afraid to lose that status, and they don't try a bit further than that, because
Ramesh?
Right, there's praising and there's overpraising, right? Now if my kid goes to a soccer team, belongs to a soccer team, and end of the year they all get a trophy, then
what's the point?
What's the point, right? If you did something extraordinary, sure, you deserve a trophy. And here, if our kids go to a dance program and they do a performance on stage, everybody gets a trophy.
We're buying praise now.
That sends a very wrong signal to the kids, right? Like, I could just be myself and do whatever and still get a trophy at the end of the day, right? So we have to.
That's why I don't agree with all the praising, because when they grow up, reality is going to hit them. There's not that many praises. You're expected to do a job. You're not going to get a praise from it. If you do something extra over and beyond and you wow the world or the people around you, then you get the praise. You praising them now is going to set the standard. Oh, everything I do, I should get a praise. And when I had employees and people like, oh, I did this, I'm like, okay, good. Here's your next task.
Totally agree.
But
so I don't believe in all this praising.
That certainly agrees when we're all mature, fully functioning adults. But at early ages, when they're vulnerable, that reinforcement is necessary to build confidence for future steps. It is,
if they do something, if I told my son to kick the ball and he kicks it, that's fine. I'm like, okay, next, can you kick it harder? If he kicks it harder than what I just told, what he just did, then good, that's a better kick, good job. Do you know what I mean? I'm going to give him a praise according to the standards I set, or the standards that he's even achieved. Not because he just, he rode his bicycle from here to there. That doesn't mean anything. I want to ride around the block and come back safely. Then I'll give him praise. Good job.
Right, because at the end of the day, we are preparing our kids to do their best. Like I certainly believe, instead of praising our kids, and do praise the kids, but we should develop our kids to think outside the box.
Set a standard for them to reach.
Exactly.
So let me pose it this way: even if they use the example of kicking the ball harder, should we even praise them for that? And let me quote something, a clinical psychologist who's done work from Berkeley. She concludes from her research, as it turns out, the children who are not told they are smart are more motivated to tackle increasingly difficult puzzles. They also exhibit higher levels of confidence and show greater overall progress in problem solving. So she's saying by not praising, it's going to motivate them further.
I think it depends on the age, like you brought
before. So let's say 3 to 9.
The younger they are, I think they do need our encouragement and praise to keep going.
But he just quoted a study that said it's the opposite. So how can you still say that?
I mean, that's certainly, it's fair study.
That's an extreme approach to what he quoted there.
It's not extreme.
She's saying no praise at all.
No praise at all, which is the opposite of even.
Yeah, what would you know? You guys are saying something in the middle when
they do something greater
than they.
But the article and somebody who's studying research for a living is saying opposite. So now I got to think back and go, really? So now it's even going in my head. I'm learning something now. I'm like, maybe there's something else I should do.
mind you, like 2 years later, another article might come up and say,
of course,
a kid that didn't get praise,
is going to become a gangster, and yeah, we understand that. Yeah.
You need to find the right.
I think it's a step.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a step by step. At the beginning you praise them, and then the further they kind of push themselves, then you kind of back off. I think also it'll be interesting to know what the age of those kids that are, right? She doesn't mention that, so.
But Ramesh, what do you feel about that? And say if we don't praise, they're going to strive for higher goals and achieve more.
Like she might be right in the article.
Okay.
But it's to speak in reality and just to think in my head, how would I, do that at home? Yeah. I would say that's a little on the extreme end, on the extreme side. All right. So I would try to find a middle ground, like where you don't overpraise it, but do praise it so that they're repeating what they're doing, right? So they have a reason to do it again, right?
But in our community, I think praising seems to be, everybody. If you go to any functions, my son is this, and my son did that, and everybody speaks so well. You're supposed to speak well of your kid, but they put their kids. Oh, my son got a trophy at a soccer. But then when you look at it, every kid gets a trophy.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? So
that's why I told you don't decide.
Yeah, our parents' generation even they praise everything, and I notice it. My son's this, and some of like even our age group are starting to do that. But in reality, they're even covering up for their kids. If their kids are really bad, my kid's the best. Then you find out he comes through the door and he's got lines on his head and 10 earrings and his pants are falling off.
Is that because they have a higher expectation of their kid?
Right. It's not that they have high expectations. I think society, or they're in their culture, they say, we have to say good things about our kid. Or people will laugh at us. I think
that's changed. Like, correct me if I'm wrong. My perception is that our society, our community now, it's changed.
It is changing, but I wouldn't say it's completely changed.
No, it's still there.
Because in his case, what his example is saying, society is dictating how the kids are brought up, and it shouldn't be the case, right?
And but
I think for our generation, we weren't praised so much.
We weren't. That's why our generation's a little bit different.
Parents now, they're praising their kids more. And why is that happening? Why do you think that's happening?
Because they have to show that their kid's better. Because keeping up with the Joneses, North American mentality. My kid is better than your kid.
I would say it's a world, like, especially back home, that was like, there's always a competitive spirit.
Of course, my son can do this, and my daughter did this, and showboating. Here, look at my daughter dance. Yeah.
Why is that happening in our new generation here in Toronto?
I hope it doesn't continue on this generation.
Because that's all they know. Yeah. Right, that's what they know. It's what our parents taught us. I went to an event on Sunday and Saturday, and the kids were dancing. The two daughters were dancing, and their father's clapping. And I hope he doesn't get mad. No offense, but I was shocked because he's taking pictures, and the daughters are dancing. And there's people. I'm like, really? They're doing hip hop dance, right? And we know there's some jiving and thrusting and stuff going on. And I'm like, I'm looking down because I don't, you know what I mean? Yeah. And my wife's looking at me. I'm like, don't look at me. It's not my kids dancing, and it's like a big, look what my daughter can do, right? No, and they're all for it.
Right. It all comes down to your parenting, right? Your expectations and what you let your kid exposed to, right? If your kid is naturally talented at something, then you should pursue that path and enhance it, right? But don't try to buy, specialized books and study on how to be a gifted student. Okay. If your kid is naturally gifted, then you take that approach.
A lot of talent parents, they want their children. I notice I'm a grade 6 teacher. They want their kids to take the gifted test.
Exactly.
And get into the school. And this article, this clinical psychologist is arguing by calling kids gifted, putting them in a label, you're actually setting them up for failure. What do you? But then
I totally agree with that. But at the same time, if your kid is naturally gifted and you put your kid in a regular classroom, then the kid might be totally bored and not learning anything. As opposed to if the kid was at a gifted program, he might be exposed to some new challenges, right? So
I agree with him on that one, because gifted kids need to have that certain kind of learning and things, and and when they grow up, and if they're smarter than the other kids, they get rewarded for that.
Yeah, but some psychologists will argue that when you place gifted kids in a certain classroom, they're told at a very young age to when they graduate that they're special, and then with that creates some arrogance or some superiority complex.
But in the corporate world where I come from, arrogance seems to be, not over arrogant, but just a little bit of arrogance, a little bit of confidence in their ability and what they can do. They're actually the stronger of the candidates, and they're more successful. They become the next VP or the director. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's important.
But it's a fine line between confidence and arrogance.
True.
Right. It's a fine line, but it's how you develop the kid and how the schools develop and things like that too.
New topic. Our community is known for placing heavy emphasis on the maths and sciences and very technical subjects. Is that, and a lot of people say that Tamil kids are doing well because of that. You see a lot of high schools, kids are doing well, engineering programs, a lot of Tamil kids. Is that a good thing? It's achieving success. It's a proven formula. What are your thoughts?
I disagree completely on that.
Okay.
Because I say, okay.
And you're a tech person,
I have an IT
math,
background.
yeah.
But if the kid shows interest on a specialized subject,
okay,
then go ahead and put them through the program or whatnot, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, now that we are in the corporate world, we see what reality is, right? And there's more to it than engineering and doctors, right? There's let your kid follow its own passion to what they want to do, but at the same time, guide them to think, outside the box again, right?
That's true. That's true. I took sciences before I jumped into my own business, so I have a little bit of both, and I don't find any practical application to what we learned in terms of math and science. Maybe because I'm more in the creative side right now, but it being in that field now allowed me to be more out there and develop my character better, and I would like to see that with my daughter, just so that she has the freedom to choose what she wants to do instead of us forcing her to do the math and sciences and all of that structured.
But some will argue you get certain skills from that. You learn discipline, you learn problem solving, you're able to approach problems in a certain way because of a math background or
but you can't get in the door for a job because you can't pass the interview, right? I know a lot of Tamil guys that are very smart, very intelligent. They have the designation. They can probably do circles, but they don't have a good job, or they're not at that exact level where they should be making 3 times their income.
So what would you recommend for Tamil parents to look at?
I think they need to look at other aspects of it, not just the education, but they have to learn the social skills. Themselves have to be social. That doesn't mean going to somebody's house and gossiping about somebody else. Social skills. Take them to little functions, kid play days with other cultures, other community people, in an effort to stay cultured. We sort of, I notice we keep them in this circle where kids that are born here, some of them have stronger, thick accents than kids that were, came here when they're 12 or 13. Right? Because we're so into, and then when they go to the school and things, kids look at them funny. Oh, you're not born here. You know what I mean? So it's that kind of a challenge.
All right. That unfortunately that brings our discussion to a close. Thank you, Aristo, Subi, and Ramesh. Dear viewers, thank you for tuning in. As always, we appreciate your comments, feedback. Please find CrossRoads on Facebook and share us your thoughts for any future shows or any of your feedback from today's show. I'm your host, Parthi Kamdaval, and have a wonderful week. And we'll end off with a clip showing the balance that's needed for good parenting.
One of her daughters made her a card, and the card was not good enough. And the child had to go back and redo the card. Now, to me, the mother lost the point here. The point was about the daughter doing something kind for the mother.
And Purcell says parents who are completely inflexible and put too much emphasis on performance and perfectionism run the risk of raising children who rebel or who become shells of people, unable to proactively find joy and passion in life. In fact, we see an example of this later in Amy Chua's book.
தமிழரின் பிம்பம் உங்கள் டிவி.